And my right knee, I had four scope jobs.
It's the kind of moment no fan ever wanted to see. Hulk Hogan, the towering icon of wrestling, lying motionless on the floor of his Clearwater home, surrounded by chaos as paramedics fought to save his life. In a world where legends feel immortal, the sudden leak of Hogan's final moments has brought a raw, heartbreaking reality crashing down on millions. Just weeks earlier, he was giving interviews, smiling, and promoting new ventures. But now, the leaked footage, unfiltered and deeply emotional, shows the devastating final chapter of a man who once seemed larger than life. As fans grapple with the images, a haunting question lingers. Were these truly natural final moments? Or is there more to the story? The harrowing footage that shook the world. In today's digital age, where every second can be recorded and shared in real time, some moments cut deeper than others, moments that strip away the illusion of invincibility. The footage that emerged on the day of Hulk Hogan's death was one such moment. Captured by a neighbor on their phone, the video shows Hogan being rushed out of his Florida home, unresponsive and limp on a stretcher. Paramedics can be seen performing desperate rounds of CPR as his chest jolts under the pressure. The sound of sirens, barked instructions, and concerned bystanders fills the air, painting a chaotic, heartbreaking portrait of a man's final fight, not in a ring, but against time. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire across social media platforms. Fans, fellow wrestlers, and even those unfamiliar with wrestling were shaken. It wasn't just the image of Hogan in distress, it was what it symbolized. This was the man who once tore shirts with ease, who survived steel cages and sold-out WrestleManias. Seeing him so vulnerable, so human, cut through generations of heroic storytelling, Hogan's death at 71 from cardiac arrest left a gaping void. For many, the footage was painful to watch, but it was also a sobering reminder: even legends fall. And when they do, the world pauses to mourn. The man behind the mask, a life of triumph and pain. To truly understand the gravity of those final moments, it helps to look back on the man behind the persona. Hogan's journey began far from the flashing lights of wrestling arenas and roaring crowds. Before he was Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea was a struggling musician living in Tampa, Florida, chasing dreams that seemed as distant as the stars. The road from those humble beginnings to global stardom was long and brutal. The world of professional wrestling in the 1970s was a harsh, territorial battleground, a landscape defined by ruthless competition and physical punishment. It was a world that did not suffer weakness lightly. The training was grueling, the initiation cruel. On his very first day, young Terry was met not with a handshake or welcome, but with a deliberately broken leg, an initiation meant to test his resolve. The established wrestlers made it clear: only those with unbreakable spirit and iron will would survive. But Terry did not walk away. Instead, he returned, hardened and determined, fueled by the words of his father who told him, "Don't ever let anybody hurt you again." That moment marked a turning point, forging the relentless determination that would become the foundation of Hulk Hogan's legendary career. The making of Hulk Hogan. Wrestling's greatest showman. Hogan's rise in the wrestling world was nothing short of meteoric. He was a charismatic showman who transcended the sport, turning wrestling into a spectacle watched by millions around the globe. His signature moves, his electrifying presence, and his unmistakable charisma transformed him from an athlete into a cultural phenomenon. His real American persona wasn't just a gimmick, it was a rallying cry for fans who saw in Hogan a symbol of strength, perseverance, and larger-than-life heroism. Through the 1980s and 90s, Hogan was the face of professional wrestling, selling out arenas worldwide and appearing on television screens in nearly every country. Yet beneath the glitz and the glimmering championship belts, Hogan was a man wrestling with his own physical and emotional battles. The physical toll of glory, decades of pain and surgeries. In the years leading up to his death, Hogan's health struggles had become increasingly apparent, though often overshadowed by his enduring public presence. Behind the scenes, the physical toll of over 4 decades of professional wrestling had left him battered and diminished. "I've had like 25 surgeries in the last 10 or 12 years, Hogan revealed in his final interviews. These weren't minor procedures. Hogan underwent multiple back surgeries, knee and hip replacements, and a range of other interventions to keep his body functioning. The wrestler who once seemed invincible was now facing the harsh reality of a body worn down by years of brutal punishment. In May 2025, just 2 months before his passing, Hogan underwent a neck procedure, a clear sign that his health was deteriorating. Yet, despite these challenges, Hogan remained remarkably candid and grounded in his reflections. His final interviews reveal a man who had accepted his physical decline with a stoic grace and a clear-eyed understanding of what his body had endured. A final public persona, the last interviews and appearances. In the final weeks of his life, Hulk Hogan was far from retreating into the shadows. He stayed remarkably engaged with the public, making what would become his final media appearances. One of the most poignant came on comedian Theo Von's podcast this past weekend. In a warm, candid conversation, Hogan shared a blend of laughter, wisdom, and raw reflection. He reminisced about the roaring energy of sold-out arenas, saying with a quiet pride, "I could actually wrestle anybody at that time and sell out." His voice carried both humility and awe, as if still amazed by the impact he once held. But it wasn't just about the glory days. Hogan opened up about the emotional layers behind the ring, especially his deep friendship with Ric Flair. He spoke of Flair's health scare with a tenderness that surprised many, revealing the bond they shared not just as rivals, but as brothers who weathered fame, pain, and survival together. These stories weren't just backstage gossip or fan service. They were windows into the soul of a man, reflecting on life, legacy, and loyalty. In hindsight, those moments feel like a quiet farewell, Hogan leaving behind a final portrait of humanity behind the headband. A spiritual journey, finding peace in the final chapter. In the quiet moments before his passing, Hulk Hogan revealed a side of himself rarely seen by the public, a man deeply reflective about life, death, and what lies beyond. In one of his final interviews with Patrick Bet-David, Hogan opened up about personal experiences that shaped his spiritual outlook, offering a glimpse into the inner world of a man who had spent decades living larger than life. Hogan shared a profoundly moving story about witnessing his father's last moments, describing with heartfelt emotion the sensation of his father's spirit leaving his body. It was an experience that seemed to shift his entire understanding of mortality and existence. For Hogan, it wasn't just about physical death. It was about the continuation of the spirit beyond what we can see or touch. This moment of connection brought him comfort and a sense of peace as he faced his own mortality, blending the haunting reality of death with a hopeful belief in something greater. This openness about spirituality was especially striking because it contrasted so vividly with the persona the world had long known, the flamboyant, charismatic wrestling superstar. Beneath all the bravado and spectacle, Hogan was wrestling with the same universal questions that confront us all. What happens when life ends? How do we find meaning in our legacy? How do we come to terms with the inevitable? Privacy mortality, and the digital age, the complex legacy of leaked footage. The recently leaked footage of Hogan's final moments adds a complex and poignant layer to his story, one that challenges how we think about privacy, dignity, and mortality in today's digital world. On one hand, these recordings offer a raw, unfiltered window into the fragility of life, reminding us that no matter how monumental someone's public life may be, their final moments are deeply human and vulnerable. Yet on the other hand, the existence and distribution of such intimate footage spark difficult questions. In an era where almost everything can be recorded and shared instantly, what boundaries remain around the privacy of those facing death? Does the public's right to witness the truth outweigh an individual's dignity in their most vulnerable state? For many fans and observers, the footage is a sobering reminder that Hulk Hogan, the invincible wrestling icon, was also a mortal man. Someone who, like all of us, faced frailty, pain, and the limits of the body. It strips away the myth and exposes the raw reality beneath the legend. These images force us to confront uncomfortable truths: that death is universal, that no amount of fame or strength can shield anyone from it, and that the way we as a society handle such moments says much about our values and empathy. Wrestling under many names, the search for identity. In those formative years, Terry tried on many wrestling personas, including Sterling Golden and Terry Boulder, none of which stuck for long. He bounced from territory to territory, often quitting when the physical toll outweighed the meager paychecks. Wrestling at that time was brutal work for paltry sums. I was wrestling 12 to 13 times a week, and sometimes the check was only $125, Hogan recalled. You'd be hitting people in a Best Western ballroom, fighting for $5 a night. The pay was barely enough to scrape by. The inconsistency was disheartening, and the physical abuse relentless. Unable to sustain himself on wrestling alone, Hogan returned periodically to work as a longshoreman in Tampa, Florida. There, he made $400 a day loading ships, far more than he earned wrestling. Remarkably, Hogan was likely the first white longshoreman in Tampa's union, working alongside predominantly Latino and Black colleagues. This experience taught him invaluable lessons about hard work, respect, and perseverance, lessons that would later serve him well in the wrestling business. The crucible of character. Learning the business of wrestling for Hulk Hogan. Wrestling was never just about brute strength or flashy moves. Early in his career, he faced the brutal reality of the wrestling world, a place where physical endurance alone wouldn't carry you to the top. It was in this crucible of pain and challenge that Hogan experienced a pivotal transformation. He realized that wrestling wasn't merely a contest of skill, it was an art of storytelling, emotional connection, and captivating the crowd's imagination. "I finally figured the business out," Hogan once reflected. "I slammed a guy down and looked at the crowd, and their reaction was bigger than the slam itself. Then I'd hit a guy in the throat, and the crowd went wild. That's when I knew it wasn't about the moves, it was about how the crowd felt." This was Hogan's epiphany, a profound shift that would reshape his entire approach. While many wrestlers obsessed over perfecting technical moves and maneuvers, Hogan learned that the real measure of success lay in the crowd's response. Whether he played the hero or the villain, he had to make the audience feel something deep and genuine. Over time, Hogan developed an almost instinctual ability to read a room, to sense when the crowd wanted to cheer for the good guy or revel in the antics of a bad guy. This gift would become the foundation of his legendary career, helping him transcend the role of just another wrestler to become a cultural icon. Wrestling abroad, the Japanese experience. Hulk Hogan's rise to superstardom didn't happen solely on American soil. long before the red and yellow became symbols of global pop culture. Hogan took his talents to Japan, where he would gain not only international acclaim, but also a deeper understanding of the wrestling craft. Wrestling for New Japan Pro Wrestling in the early 1980s, Hogan found himself immersed in a vastly different world. The Japanese style was stiffer, more grounded in martial arts, and stripped of the flamboyant showmanship common in American wrestling. Here, matches were about grit, endurance, and storytelling through movement rather than spectacle. To Japanese fans, Hogan wasn't just a visiting star, he was Ichiban, or number one. They embraced him with a reverence that surprised even the Hulkster. "When I walked into Japan," Hogan once said, his face lighting up, "they treated me like royalty. It was like being Brad Pitt and Tom Brady all rolled into one." That respect stayed with him. The experience tested him physically and mentally, but it also opened his eyes to the global language of wrestling, a form of art and combat that could connect people across cultures, even without a single word spoken. For Hogan, Japan wasn't just a career stop, it was a chapter of growth, humility, and cross-cultural reverence. Breaking through from Rocky III to WWF stardom, Hogan's mainstream breakthrough came when he landed a cameo in the blockbuster film Rocky III. This appearance introduced him to a much wider audience, beyond wrestling fans, and showcased his larger-than-life persona to the masses. This exposure caught the eye of Vince McMahon Sr., who saw potential in Hogan and signed him to the World Wrestling Federation, WWF. However, it was Vince McMahon Jr. who truly understood Hogan's star power and envisioned building an empire around him. Vince McMahon Jr. had a revolutionary idea: to break down the territorial system that had long governed professional wrestling and create a national and eventually global promotion. But to pull off such a dramatic transformation, he needed a superstar capable of connecting with audiences everywhere, regardless of their familiarity with the wrestling business. Hogan was exactly that superstar. He possessed a rare charisma and the ability to instantly engage fans, making him the perfect face to unify the fragmented wrestling markets. "I started the whole Hulkamania thing in Minnesota," Hogan said proudly. "When I came out to that theme music, the crowd went crazy. It was electric." From that moment, momentum built rapidly, and there was no turning back. Turf wars and real threats, the cost of disruption. But Hogan's rise was far from smooth. The WWF's expansion disrupted the established order, and Hogan became a lightning rod for hostility in the territories he invaded. Wrestling territories had long operated like closed kingdoms, fiercely protective of their own, and Hogan's presence was seen as a direct threat. One particularly harrowing example came in Kansas City, where Harley Race, a former Marine and NWA World Champion, was known for defending his turf with ferocity. Hogan has recounted how Race once tried to burn down the wrestling ring during the day and allegedly put a gun to Hogan's head that very night. "These were no scripted threats," Hogan explained. "They were real." The danger was tangible and underscored the intensity of the wrestling business before it went national. Despite these threats, the economic realities of the changing wrestling landscape became impossible to ignore. Many territorial wrestlers eventually joined McMahon's growing organization, accepting that the era of regional kingdoms was over. Hogan's drawing power and the WWF's marketing machine were revolutionizing professional wrestling forever, transforming it into a spectacle that could captivate audiences from coast to coast. The birth of Hulkamania, a cultural phenomenon. The official birth of Hulkamania is often traced to January 23, 1984, when Hogan defeated the Iron Sheik at Madison Square Garden to win the WWF Championship. Yet this iconic moment was the culmination of years of hard work, growth and character development. The timing was also remarkably fortuitous. America was gripped by Cold War anxieties and the Iran hostage crisis, creating a national mood hungry for symbols of strength and patriotism. Hogan's all-American hero character struck a powerful chord. He wasn't just a wrestler, he became an emblem of American pride and resilience. Under Vince McMahon's visionary leadership, wrestling evolved from a fragmented regional pastime into a national spectacle. Innovations that seem commonplace now, entrance music, elaborate merchandise campaigns, celebrity guest appearances, and television crossovers, were revolutionary at the time. Hogan stood front and center in this transformation. He headlined 8 of the first 9 WrestleMania events, turning the annual spectacle into wrestling's equivalent of the Super Bowl. His match against Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 drew a staggering 93,173 fans to the Pontiac Silverdome, creating one of the most legendary moments in sports entertainment history. That moment cemented Hulk Hogan not just as a wrestling superstar, but as a cultural icon whose influence reached far beyond the ring. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more valuable updates.